I think it's pretty clear that from Christ's perspective, and from the perspective of God, even in the beginning, when Adam and Eve were created, there's always a part in Genesis that is intriguing. It's because in that day you shall die, is what Christ supposedly says about eating God supposedly about eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But in Greek, it actually reads, dying you will die, the Greek words. And the Hebrew words track with that, as if it's not a question of one death that's going to occur. It's a question of a process of dying that has been happening, but that will happen with a finality that's not the usual thing.
Question for you. I have a question. What makes you afraid? What are things in this life, either now or in the times past?
Oh, well, many things made me afraid in times past because I was all preoccupied with this physical body, so physical things made me afraid. You can't help but have physical fear anyway. So if I stand too close to the edge of cliffs, I get this apprehension because I'm one of those people who feels like I'm not going to be able to resist the temptation to just kind of fly and
you
see
and
if it works
Churchill.
out.
Winston Churchill said, I'm not going to stand too close to the edge of a boat. I'm afraid I'll jump over.
No, not so much jumping as testing out theory. But
you can't fly. I'm letting you know right now. You cannot fly.
Well, you know that song. Yeah, so this shows how alienated you are from our contemporary culture, because wasn't there a song?
I believe I can fly.
I believe I can touch the sky. Yeah, that's exactly
you take the lead, I'll harmonize.
But so when I don't know. There's possibly a part of me that wants to test out that theory, but there are obviously other things that one is afraid of. I remember being on one of those little aircraft when I was in the State Department, and part of a delegation we were wandering around talking to the various opposing sides in southern Africa. Now, these are people at war with each other. And so when you're flying around talking to people who are at war with each other, you very often have to fly over the territory that they're warring in. And the interesting thing about being a diplomat is that unlike soldiers and all that, they go into warring territories, but they're prepared to defend themselves. Diplomats go into warring territories, with nothing but their, diplomatic intentions.
And chutzpah.
And so you have gotten an assurance that the party you're flying over when you're going to talk to the enemy is not going to shoot at you. So you're relying on their word that nothing's going to happen to you, and meanwhile you're flying over their territory and thinking to yourself, well, what if the word didn't get to everybody? This is, after all, Africa. Communications isn't great, and so forth. And so you're
prior to cell phones.
You may fall prey to that. And there came a point in that flight where on one of these little planes where we went through this storm, really bad one, and we're bouncing up and down with those sort of gut-wrenching drops and all of this sort of thing. And I'll admit that, and I apparently wasn't the only one, it was one of those times when I discovered full-fledged what they say is true. The fear has a smell, and the smell of it filled that cabin. And though all of us were sitting there looking diplomatic and everything, it was still the case that it filled the cabin. And it's one of those testimonies to the fact that, yes, mind over matter or spirit over matter, it does happen.
The straight lines that you're giving me are so bad. I have everything in my power to not talk about, say, depends. How afraid were we in the plane? All right, let's change the subject. So you had this experience. What makes you afraid on the cultural side? What makes you afraid?
Well, this is what I was going to get to, though, because I think, especially as I have gotten older, but also as you gain more experience.
How old are you?
And right now I'm going on 64.
You look good.
Not as good as I ought to, my wife says.
She's a beautiful
I look
woman.
about 40 pounds over what I need to look.
There's more of me than love, honey.
No, you just mentioned that, but this is one of the drawbacks of having married a beautiful woman, because she's still beautiful, and I'm over here looking like me, and this makes what was always a contrast even worse. So you walk into the room, people say, "What on earth is she doing with him?"
In social revolution, peaceful social revolution, there are rules. And those rules have been established by social revolutions of the past, and the Christian community in America has failed to obey a lot of those rules, and that's why we keep losing. I put together Insurrecta Next, a 14-part television series on the history and the theology of social revolution. I encourage you to watch it. It will make you a force for righteousness, for social revolution.